The Knights of the Cross by Henryk Sienkiewicz. Leave a comment if you have an idea for the next book. Chapter 26. The old prior crossed his hands and began to recite aloud the eternal rest. Then he sat down on a bench and kept his eyes closed for a while, as if to collect his thoughts. Finally, he began to talk. Wincenti of Shamatul brought them here. I was 20 years old then, and I had just come from Cilia with my uncle Petzold. The Krzyżacy attacked the town and set it on fire. We could see from the walls how in the market square they cut men and women's heads off, and how they threw little children into the fire. They even killed the priests, because in their fury they spared nobody. The prior Mikolai, having been born in Elbląg, was acquainted with Komthur Hermann, the chief of their army. Therefore he went accompanied by the senior brothers to that dreadful knight, and having kneeled before him, entreated him in German to have pity on Christian blood. Komthur Hermann replied, "I do not understand," and ordered his soldiers to continue killing the people. They slaughtered the monks also, among them my uncle Petzold. The prior Mikolai was tied to a horse's tail. The next morning there was no man alive in this town except the Krzyżacy and myself. I hid on a beam in the belfry. God punished them at Plaus, but they still want to destroy this Christian kingdom, and nothing will deter them unless God's arm crush them. At Plaus, said Zbyszko, almost all the men of my family perished, but I do not regret it, for God granted a great victory to the king Lokietek, and 20,000 Germans were destroyed. You will see a still greater war and a greater victory, said the prior. Amen, answered Zbyszko. Then they began to talk about other matters. The young knight asked about the peddler of relics, whom he met on the road. He learned that many similar swindlers were wandering on the roads, cheating credulous people. The prior also told him that there were papal bulls ordering the bishops to examine such peddlers and immediately punish those who did not have authentic letters and seals. The testimonials of the stranger seemed spurious to the prior. Therefore, he wanted to deliver him to the bishop's jurisdiction. If he proved that he was sent by the Pope, then no harm would be done him. He escaped, however. Perhaps he was afraid of the delay in his journey, but on account of this flight, he had drawn on himself still greater suspicion. The prior invited Zbyszko to remain and pass the night in the monastery, but he would not, because he wanted to hang in front of the inn an inscription challenging all knights who denied that Panna Danuta Jurandowna was the most beautiful and the most virtuous girl in the kingdom, to a combat on horseback or on foot. It was not proper to hang such a challenge over the gate of the monastery. When he arrived at the inn, he asked for Sanderus. The prior thinks you are a scoundrel, said Zbyszko, because he said, why should he be afraid of the bishop's judgment if he had good testimonials? I am not afraid of the bishop, answered Sanderus. I am afraid of the monks who do not know anything about seals. I wanted to go to Krakow, but I have no horse. Therefore I must wait until somebody makes me a present of one. Meanwhile, I will send a letter, and I will put my own seal on it. If you show that you know how to write, that will prove that you are not a churl, but how will you send the letter? By some pilgrim or wandering monk. There are many people going on a pilgrimage to the Queen's tomb. Can you write a card for me? I will write, sir, even on a board, anything you wish. I think it will be better on a board, said Zbyszko, because it will not tear and I can use it again later on. In fact, after a while the attendants brought a new board and Sanderus wrote on it. Zbyszko could not read what was written on the board, but he ordered it fastened with nails on the door of the inn, under it to be hung a shield, which was watched by the Turks alternately. Whoever struck the shield would declare that he wished to fight. But neither that day nor the following day did the shield resound from a blow, and in the afternoon the sorrowful knight was ready to pursue his journey. Before that, however, Sanderus came to Zbyszko and said to him, Sir, if you hang your shield in the land of the Prussian lords, I am sure your shield-bearer will buckle your armor. What do you mean? Don't you know that a Krzyżak, being a monk, cannot have a lady nor be in love with one, because it is forbidden him? I do not know whether it is forbidden them or not, but I know that they have them. It is true that a Krzyżak cannot fight a duel without bringing reproach on himself, because he swore that he would fight only for the faith, But besides the monks, there are many secular knights from distant countries who came to help the Prussian lords. They are looking for someone to fight with, and especially the French knights. I saw them at Wilno, and with God's permission I shall see them in Marienburg. I need the peacocks' crests from their helmets because I made a vow, do you understand? Sir, I will sell you 2 or 3 drops of the perspiration which St. George shed while fighting with the dragon. There is no relic which could be more useful to a knight. Give me the horse for it, on which you permitted me to ride. Then I will also give you an indulgence for the Christian blood which you will shed in the fight. Let me be, or I shall become angry. I shall not buy your wares until I know they are genuine. You are going, sir, so you have said, to the Mazowiecki court. Ask there how many relics they bought from me, the princess herself, the knights and the girls for their weddings, at which I was present. For what weddings? asked Zbyszko. As is customary before Advent, the knights were marrying as soon as they could, because the people are expecting that there will be a war between the Polish king and the Prussian lords about the province of Dobrzen. Therefore some of them say, God knows whether I shall return. Zbyszko was very anxious to hear about the war, but still more anxious to hear about the weddings of which Senderis was talking. Therefore he asked, which girls were married there? The princess's ladies-in-waiting. I do not know whether even one remained, because I heard the princess say that she would be obliged to look for other attendants. Having heard this, Zbyszko was silent for a while. Then he asked in an altered voice, was Panna Danuta Urandovna, whose name is on the board, married also? Senderis hesitated before he answered. He did not know anything correctly himself. Then he thought that if he kept the knight anxious and perplexed, he would have more influence over him. He wanted to retain his power over this knight who had a goodly retinue and was well provided with everything. Zbyszko's youth led him to suppose that he would be a generous lord, without forethought and careless of money. He had noticed already the costly armor made in Milan and the enormous stallions, which everybody could not possess. Then he assured himself that if he traveled with such a knight, he would receive hospitality in noblemen's houses and a good opportunity to sell his indulgences. He would be safe during the journey and have abundance of food and drink, about which he cared greatly. Therefore, having heard Zbyszko's question, he frowned, lifted his eyes as if he were trying to recollect, and answered, Panna Danuta Urandowna? Where is she from? Urandowna Danuta of Spykow. I saw all of them, but I cannot remember their names. She is very young. She plays the lute and amuses the princess with her singing. Aha, young, plays the lute. There were some young ones married also. Is she dark like an agate? Zbyszko breathed more freely. No, that was not she. Danusia is as white as snow, but has pink cheeks. To this Senderis replied, one of them, dark as an agate, remained with the princess. The others were almost all married. You say almost all, therefore not all. For God's sake, if you wish to get anything from me, then try to recollect. In 2 or 3 days I could recollect. The best way will be to give me a horse, on which I can carry my holy wares. You will get it if you only tell me the truth. At that moment the Czech, who was listening to the conversation, smiled and said, the truth will be known at the Mazowiecki court. Senderis looked at him for a while. Then he said, do you think that I am afraid of the Mazowiecki court? I do not say you are afraid of the Mazowiecki court, but neither now nor after 3 days will you go away with the horse. If it prove that you were lying, then you will not be able to go on your feet either, because my lord will order me to break them. Be sure of that, answered Zbyszko. Senderis now thought that it would be wiser to be more careful, and said, if I wanted to lie, I would have said immediately whether she was married or not. But I said, I don't remember. If you had common sense, you would recognize my virtue by that answer. My common sense is not a brother of your virtue, because that is the sister of a dog. My virtue does not bark as your common sense does, and the one who barks when alive may howl after death. That is sure. Your virtue will not howl after your death. It will gnash its teeth, provided it does not lose its teeth in the service of the devil while living. Thus they quarreled. The Czech's tongue was ready, and for every word of the German he answered too. Zbyszko, having asked about the road to Lencisa, ordered the retinue to move forward. Beyond Sieradz, they entered thick forests which covered the greater part of the country. But the highways through these forests had been paved with logs and ditches dug along the sides by the order of King Kazimierz. It is true that after his death, during the disturbances of the war aroused by Nolents and Grimalits, the roads were neglected. But during Jadwiga's reign, when peace was restored to the kingdom, shovels were again busy in the marshes and axes in the forests. Soon everywhere between the important cities, merchants could conduct their loaded wagons in safety. The only danger was from wild beasts and robbers, but against the beasts they had lanterns for night and crossbows for defense during the day. Then there were fewer highway robbers than in other countries, and one who traveled with an armed retinue need fear nothing. Zbyszko was not afraid of robbers nor of armed knights. He did not even think about them, but he was filled with great anxiety and longed with his whole soul to be at the Mazowiecki court. Would he find Danusia still a lady-in-waiting of the princess, or the wife of some Mazowiecki knight? Sometimes it seemed to him impossible that she should forget him. Then sometimes he thought that perhaps Jurand went to the court from Spykow and married the girl to some neighbor or friend. Jurand had told him in Krakow that he could not give Danusia to him. Therefore it was evident that he had promised her to somebody else. Evidently he was bound by an oath, and now he had fulfilled his promise. Zbyszko called Sanderus and questioned him again, but the German prevaricated more and more. Therefore Zbyszko was riding along, sad and unhappy. He did not think about Bogdaniec, nor about Zgorzelitsa, but only how he should act. First, it was necessary to ascertain the truth at the Mazowiecki court. Therefore, he rode hastily, only stopping for a short time at the houses of noblemen, in the inns and in the cities to rest the horses. He had never ceased to love Danusia, but while in Bogdaniec and Zgorzelets, chatting almost every day with Jagienka and admiring her beauty, he had not thought about Danusia often. Now she was constantly in his thoughts, day and night. Even in his sleep, he saw her standing before him, with a lute in her hands and a garland on her head. She stretched her hands toward him, and Jurand drew her away. In the morning, when the dreams disappeared, a greater longing came, and he loved this girl more than ever now, when he was uncertain whether they had taken her from him or not. Sometimes he feared that they had married her against her will. Therefore, he was not angry with her, as she was only a child and could not have her own will. But he was angry with Jurand and with Princess Janishovna. He determined that he would not cease to serve her. Even if he found her somebody else's wife, he would deposit the peacock's crests at her feet. Sometimes he was consoled by the thought of a great war. He felt that during the war he would forget about everything and that he would escape all sorrows and griefs. The great war seemed suspended in the air. It was not known whence the news came, because there was peace between the king and the order. Nevertheless, wherever Zbyszko went, nothing else was talked about. The people had a presentiment that it would come, and some of them said openly, "Why were we united with Litwa, if not against those wolves, the Knights of the Cross? Therefore we must finish with them once for all, or they will destroy us." Others said, "Crazy monks, they are not satisfied with Plaus. Death is over them, and still they have taken the land of Dobjin." In all parts of the kingdom they were making preparations, gravely, without boasting, as was customary for a fight for life or death, but with the silent, deadly grudge of a mighty nation, which had suffered wrongs for a long time, and finally was ready to administer a terrible punishment. In all the houses of the nobility, Zbyszko met people who were convinced that at any moment one might be obliged to mount his horse. Zbyszko was pleased to see these hasty preparations which he met at every step. Everywhere other cares gave way to thoughts about horses and armor. Everywhere the people were gravely inspecting spears, swords, axes, helmets, and javelins. The blacksmiths were busy day and night, hammering iron sheets and making heavy armor, which could hardly be lifted by the refined Western knights, but which the strong noblemen of Wielko and Malopolska could wear very easily. The old people were pulling out musty bags full of gjuns from their chests for the war expedition of their children. Once Zbyszko passed the night in the house of a wealthy nobleman, Bartosz of Bielau, who, having 22 sturdy sons, pledged his numerous estates to the monastery in Lowicz to purchase 22 suits of armor, the same number of helmets and weapons of war. Zbyszko now realized that it would be necessary to go to Prussia, and he thanked God that he was so well provided. Many thought that he was the son of a wojewoda score, and when he told the people that he was a simple nobleman, and that armor such as he wore could be bought from the Germans by paying for it with a good blow of an axe, their hearts were filled with enthusiasm for war. Many a knight, seeing that armor, and desiring to possess it, followed Zbyszko and said, "Will you not fight for it?"
Remember to subscribe.